Have you ever wondered what lurks in the hidden corners of your personality? Those traits or impulses you'd rather not acknowledge? Every person carries a shadow side, sometimes called the dark side of personality, which consists of the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors we tend to hide or suppress. In psychology, this concept of a shadow self was famously introduced by Carl Jung, who believed our personalities encompass both light and dark aspects. While we often showcase our positive qualities to the world, the unpleasant or socially unacceptable traits get pushed out of sight. But ignoring these hidden aspects doesn't make them disappear. In fact, embracing your shadow can lead to profound self-understanding and growth. In this video, we'll explore what the dark side of your personality reveals about you and why acknowledging it is crucial. We'll discuss the origins of the shadow self, the consequences of ignoring it, and how to approach your dark side with an informative professional perspective. By the end, you'll see that your shadow isn't a flaw to eliminate, but a part of you that, when understood, can illuminate valuable insights about your desires, vulnerabilities, and strengths. Let's dive into the shadowy depths of human psychology and learn how embracing your dark side can ultimately make you a more balanced, whole, and authentic individual. The shadow self refers to the unconscious part of the personality that holds our repressed thoughts, weaknesses, impulses, and base instincts. Psychologist Carl Jung coined the term shadow to describe those aspects of ourselves that we deem undesirable and therefore push into the background. In everyday terms, it's the dark side of your personality, the side we tend not to show in public. Jung theorized that a complete personality includes both positive and negative traits, but we only present the traits we find acceptable to our conscious identity, which he called the persona. The rest, the dangerous or unappealing thoughts and feelings, get psychologically repressed into the shadow. Think of your personality as an iceberg. The part above water is the persona or the self-image you show to the world, while the massive chunk below the surface is the shadow, containing all that you reject or hide. We all have qualities we prefer not to admit to, such as selfishness, aggression, vulnerability, or shame. As one writer put it, beneath the social mask we wear every day, we have a hidden shadow side, an impulsive, wounded, sad, or isolated part that we generally try to ignore. This hidden side dwells within the unconscious mind and is composed of repressed ideas, instincts, impulses, weaknesses, desires, and embarrassing fears. It's often described as the darker side of the psyche, associated with chaos or wildness, yet it can also be a source of creative energy and vitality when tapped into. Importantly, the shadow isn't literally evil or demonic. It's simply the parts of us we consider not nice or unacceptable. Psychologists note that this includes our primal basic instincts that society teaches us to civilize or hide. For example, feelings like rage, greed, jealousy, or intense desire are normal human emotions. But we learn early on that openly expressing them can lead to rejection or punishment. Over time, these impulses get banished into the shadow self. Yet, as Jung observed, those instincts do not actually vanish. They only lose contact with our conscious mind and seek expression indirectly. In other words, what we bury inside can still influence us in subtle ways. To summarize, your shadow self is the dark side of your personality, the collection of traits, emotions, and impulses you subconsciously hide because you or your culture have labeled them as unacceptable. It's an inevitable byproduct of how we develop and socialize. Understanding this definition sets the stage for learning why embracing the shadow is so important. After all, you can't address or learn from what you won't acknowledge. No one is born with a fully formed shadow. It develops as we do. In childhood, we are like blank canvases, naturally expressing a full range of emotions and behaviors. But as we grow up, we start to learn the rules and norms of society, what is considered good behavior, and what is bad or shameful. Parents, teachers, and peers all contribute to this conditioning. When a child is scolded for showing anger or told that nice kids don't act that way, the child learns to suppress that anger to gain approval. Bit by bit, the qualities deemed unacceptable get split off. The moment we start dividing our traits into good versus bad, our persona and shadow begin to form. Jung described this as putting on a social mask, which he called the persona, to navigate society's expectations. The word persona literally means mask, symbolizing the face we show the world. Attached to that mask is our shadow, containing everything behind the scenes that we don't want the world to see. In essence, the persona is the lovable face we present to the world, while the shadow is the face we hide from the world. They are two sides of the same coin. As soon as we develop a public persona, a shadow is also born, holding all the parts of us that don't fit the desired image. Culture and religion often reinforce shadow formation. Many spiritual teachings emphasize virtues like love, compassion, and purity while condemning darker traits like anger, lust, or envy. As a result, people striving to be good or holy may push their darker impulses even deeper down, hoping to transcend them. However, completely denying these aspects is a mistake, as we'll discuss later. History and myth are full of symbols of this inner split. For instance, the motif of an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. Even literature and film portray shadow selves. Think of characters like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or the transformation of Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader, dramatizing the pull between light and dark within a person. A powerful illustration of the universality of the shadow comes from writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who noted that the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. This means no person is 100% good or 100% bad. We each have the capacity for both. It's easy to point fingers at evil people out there, but the truth is that the potential for those same evils resides in us, in our shadow. Recognizing this can be uncomfortable, but it's also the first step toward a more honest understanding of human nature. In summary, our dark side develops through a socialization process. As we learn to adopt a socially acceptable persona, we simultaneously push unacceptable traits into the shadow. This happens to everyone, forming an inevitable part of the human psyche. Knowing how and why the shadow is formed helps us appreciate that having a dark side isn't a defect. It's a natural result of growing up within a society with rules and norms. It's crucial to emphasize that having a shadow side is completely normal. Everyone, even the kindest, most well-intentioned person you know, has aspects of themselves that they'd rather not broadcast. Psychologist Connie Zweig, who co-authored Romancing the Shadow, stated that the shadow is not an error or a flaw. It is a part of the natural order of who we are. And it is not a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be faced. In other words, the dark side of your personality isn't an indication that something is wrong with you. It's an inherent part of being human. Trying to completely eradicate your shadow would be like trying to eliminate night and have 24 hours of daylight. Impossible and not actually healthy. Just as day and night balance each other in nature, our light and dark traits create a necessary balance in our psyche. We often label shadow qualities as negative because they're associated with difficult emotions or socially taboo desires. Yet, those qualities are parts, not the whole, of who we are. They only become a serious problem if they are ignored and allowed to take over our behavior unconsciously. One key point to remember is that shadow traits are not inherently evil or useless. Many have a purpose or an evolutionary origin. For example, anger, often a shadow trait, can alert us to injustices or violations of our boundaries, which is useful. Fear can protect us from danger, and even traits like competitiveness or lust have their place in motivating survival and connection. The issue is when we deny these aspects so completely that they operate without any conscious check. In fact, some shadow traits can be beneficial in certain contexts. An article on shadow psychology points out that characteristics we deem negative can have upsides. Being lustful, for example, can help to add fire to your relationship. Displaying emotional detachment can be beneficial while performing a major surgery. Being paranoid can help you safely parent an unruly child. This doesn't mean we should always act on these impulses, but it means there is a spectrum. What's bad in one situation might be helpful in another. Our goal shouldn't be to destroy the shadow, but to understand it and reintegrate it in a healthy way. Accepting that everyone has a dark side also fosters compassion. When you realize that your neighbor, your friend, your partner, and indeed you yourself all struggle with inner thoughts or feelings that aren't flattering, you become less likely to harshly judge others. As meditation teacher Alan Locos says, we all have our shadow sides. They are not bad. It is when we don't have awareness that problems arise. Only once we are aware can we change. This perspective encourages us to replace self-judgment, or judgment of others, with understanding. It's okay that you experience jealousy or anger. What matters is becoming mindful of it. By bringing compassionate awareness to our darker impulses, we prevent them from defining us. We are more than our anger or our selfishness. Those are just parts of a much larger, complex whole. In short, having a dark side is a normal part of being human, not something to feel ashamed about. Acknowledging this fact sets a foundation for growth. When we stop denying the existence of our shadow, we can approach it with curiosity and care instead of fear or self-loathing. Remember, to be whole is to be everything, the positive and the negative, the good and the bad. Embracing your shadow is ultimately about embracing your full humanity. What happens if we don't acknowledge our dark side? Unfortunately, ignoring the shadow does not mean it goes away. Repressed aspects of our personality have a way of resurfacing, often in destructive or self-sabotaging ways. Psychologists warn that the shadow, if left unexamined, can hijack our behavior, relationships, and well-being. In other words, the less aware you are of your shadow, the more it can control you from behind the scenes. As Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This means that those disowned parts of you could be silently steering your decisions and reactions. All the while, you remain oblivious that it's happening. One common way the shadow operates is through projection. This psychological phenomenon involves attributing your own unacceptable feelings or traits to someone else. For example, a person who refuses to admit their own selfish impulses might constantly accuse others of being selfish. Jung described projection as seeing in others what we won't see in ourselves. It's an unconscious strategy. Our mind deflects attention from our shadow by magnifying those flaws externally. The trouble with projection is that it distorts reality and harms our relationships. We might unjustly vilify others or clash with people based on our own hidden issues. It also means we never address the real source of the problem within us. Left unchecked, the shadow self can thus create a lot of conflict and pain, both internally and in our interactions. Another danger of ignoring the shadow is the buildup of inner tension. Pushing down emotions like anger, fear, or grief doesn't resolve them. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. Eventually, it's going to burst up with force. As one source puts it, the more our darkness is avoided, the more it grows within us, waiting like a volcano to gush out at any unexpected moment. This can manifest as explosive anger outbursts, emotional breakdowns, or sudden irrational behavior when a repressed part finally demands attention. Psych Central notes that when we don't own all parts of ourselves, we may find aspects of life increasingly challenging. We might overcompensate in unhealthy ways. For instance, someone denying their fear might take excessive risks, or someone denying their vulnerability might become unusually aggressive or domineering to cover it up. Moreover, a divided self, one in which the persona and shadow are completely at odds, can contribute to mental and emotional distress. Jung believed that poor integration of the personality could result in a distorted sense of self. Research has suggested that a lack of individuation, integrating all parts of the self, correlates with issues like anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. When you are essentially at war with yourself, expending energy to keep parts of you hidden, it's exhausting and undermines your well-being. In extreme cases, such inner fragmentation can lead to what some call a disintegration of the personality, a state where a person feels they are falling apart or breaking down under stress. Loner Wolf, a personal development site, describes how a person who remains fragmented may struggle to handle adversity because they lack a solid, whole center to cope from. Finally, ignoring your shadow can stunt personal growth. If you avoid ever looking at your flaws or mistakes, you also avoid learning from them. It's been observed that people who refuse to see their own capacity for wrongdoing end up repeating the same errors, blaming fate or others for their misfortunes. We all like to think of ourselves as good people, but clinging to that label so tightly that we dismiss our darker impulses actually makes us more likely to act on them unwittingly. Acknowledging that each of us has the potential for both light and darkness helps ensure we don't unconsciously let the darkness slip out in harmful ways. Paradoxically, facing the possibility that I could harm others under certain conditions is what helps most people not do so because they remain vigilant and self-aware. In summary, ignoring your shadow side is dangerous. It can lead to projection, blaming others for your own traits, sudden emotional eruptions, chronic anxiety or depression, and a feeling of inner division. As one psychologist put it, if we face up to our dark side, our life can be energized. If not, there is the devil to pay. The devil in this case comes in the form of all those negative consequences mentioned. By avoiding the uncomfortable task of looking at our shadow, we ultimately pay a higher price in the form of turmoil and lost opportunities for growth. If the shadow contains all these hidden pieces of us, then exploring it can reveal a treasure trove of insight. There's a saying in Jungian circles that the gold is in the dark. By that, they mean our greatest potentials often lie dormant in the parts of ourselves we've disowned. When you shine a light on your shadow, you begin to discover what it's been trying to tell you all along. Here are some of the key revelations and gifts that your dark side can offer. Unmet needs and true feelings. Your shadow often holds feelings you've suppressed, which can point to needs that aren't being met. For example, continual resentment, a dark emotion, might reveal that you have been ignoring your need for respect or boundaries in a relationship. Psychologists note that by practicing shadow work, consciously exploring your inner darkness, you can clarify your thoughts, feelings, and unmet needs, which in turn helps you make better decisions in life. In short, the dark side shines a light on what's really going on inside you, beyond the polite facade. Those hidden emotions, once acknowledged, tell you what you truly want, fear, or value. Hidden strengths and positive qualities. It may sound surprising, but not everything in the shadow is purely negative. Sometimes positive qualities that we've rejected end up there too, perhaps because we were taught to be humble or not to shine too bright. You might have buried creative talents, assertiveness, or ambition in your shadow if you grew up feeling those traits were unwelcome. Embracing your shadow can reclaim these strengths. Even the overtly negative traits can be flipped to reveal a useful side. Aggression, when channeled, becomes the assertiveness needed to stand up for yourself. Fear, when faced, becomes wisdom and caution. As one source explains, fear becomes an opportunity for courage. Pain is a catalyst for strength and resilience. Aggression is transmuted into warrior-like passion. By probing the dark side, you uncover these raw energies and have the chance to refine them into something constructive like finding diamonds in the rough in your core wounds. Many aspects of our shadow originate from past hurts, what some might call core wounds or unresolved trauma. By examining what triggers strong negative reactions in you, the shadow reveals where you have healing work to do. For instance, if criticism makes you disproportionately angry, perhaps your shadow is protecting an old wound of feeling inadequate. Bringing this into awareness reveals exactly what needs healing in order for you to grow. As we integrate those wounded parts, we reclaim those lost pieces of ourselves and move toward wholeness. Thus, the dark side can act as a guide to our deepest emotional injuries, inviting us to attend to them with compassion. Authenticity, your real self. Perhaps the greatest revelation in confronting your shadow is the discovery of your authentic self. We spend a lot of energy maintaining a persona that fits social norms, sometimes to the point where we lose sight of who we genuinely are. The shadow contains the honest, unfiltered truths about your feelings and desires. When you merge your conscious self with these hidden aspects, you become more authentic and self-aware. You no longer live solely as the mask you present. You start to live as a whole person. This authenticity can be incredibly liberating. You learn that you are allowed to feel anger or sadness, that you do in fact dislike certain acceptable things, or that you crave a life different from what others expected of you. In Jungian psychology, this process of integrating all parts of the self is part of individuation, essentially becoming the true individual you are meant to be. Embracing your shadow is a key step on that journey, revealing who you are when you're not busy trying to be who you should be. Compassion and human understanding. By facing your own darkness, you often gain insight into human nature as a whole. You start to understand how someone could be driven by jealousy or fear because you've seen those drives in yourself. This doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior, but it does mean you develop a more nuanced understanding of it. The shadow thus reveals a kind of shared humanity, that we all struggle with similar demons. This can lead to greater empathy for others and for yourself. In fact, one article pointed out that embracing your dark side can actually make you a nicer person, because healthy people express all of their emotions and embrace the wisdom that come from the darker ones like anger, disgust, jealousy, etc. Zero source. The idea being that when you learn from your dark emotions, you handle them in healthier ways and become more compassionate. While that source may be more of an opinion piece, it aligns with psychological insights. Self-awareness of your shadow can improve your emotional intelligence and kindness. All these points underline a key theme. Within your shadow lies not just darkness, but also insight, wisdom, and even light. When we say, what the dark side reveals, it is essentially revealing you to yourself in a fuller, richer way than the polite version of you that you normally show. As Debbie Ford, author of The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, wrote, "Every aspect of ourselves has a gift. Each emotion and every trait we possess helps show us the way to enlightenment, to oneness. By finding the gift in a trait you once rejected, for example, realizing that your tendency to be controlling comes from a deep care for doing things well, you transform your relationship with yourself. In practical terms, acknowledging your dark side might reveal that a career you chose solely to impress others actually doesn't fulfill you. So your suppressed dissatisfaction surfaces as procrastination or stress. That revelation could push you to pursue work that truly aligns with your passions. Or you might realize that the anger you feel in certain situations is teaching you what you value most, prompting you to stand up for those values constructively. In short, your shadow can be a teacher. Its lessons, once learned, often point the way toward greater purpose, integrity, and self-acceptance. Embracing your shadow, also known as doing shadow work, is challenging, but it comes with significant benefits for your mental, emotional, and even physical health. By embracing, we mean acknowledging, accepting, and integrating your dark side, not acting it out recklessly. When done properly, the process of facing your shadow leads to positive outcomes such as greater self-awareness and personal growth. This is perhaps the most immediate benefit. The more you understand all facets of yourself, the less you are at the mercy of unknown forces within. Instead of being blindly driven by unconscious impulses, you become able to observe and choose your actions. One clinical perspective notes that, by exploring these hidden facets of yourself, you can become aware of them, possibly opening yourself up to a higher level of perception, consciousness, and self-control. Self-awareness is the cornerstone of personal growth. You can't change or improve what you're unaware of. Shadow work shines a light on those blind spots, enabling real change. People who have integrated their shadows often describe feeling more centered and in control of their lives. Improved relationships. When you embrace your shadow, you tend to project less onto others and take more responsibility for your own emotions. This reduces unnecessary conflicts. For example, if you've accepted that you have a tendency to be jealous, you're less likely to accuse your partner or friends baselessly. Instead, you can communicate and manage that jealousy in a healthy way. Accepting your own flaws also makes you more forgiving of others. Psychologist Allison Abrams explains that releasing negative judgments about oneself, healing the shadow, also helps prevent those issues from hijacking our relationships. In essence, self-compassion blossoms into compassion for others. You become a better listener, less reactive, and more empathetic once you aren't constantly denying parts of yourself or feeling triggered by others who display your disowned traits. Inner peace and emotional healing. Embracing your dark side is fundamentally a healing journey. Instead of battling yourself, you start to make peace with yourself. This often brings a sense of relief and inner calm. The integration of the shadow is associated with what Jung called individuation, becoming whole, and with that wholeness comes a feeling of peace. You are no longer exhausting mental energy maintaining rigid walls between your good self and bad self. As Debbie Ford wrote, "We exhaust our internal resources when we try not to be something. Letting go of that exhausting internal war can reduce stress, anxiety, and self-loathing." Some research even suggests that unresolved internal conflicts, like unacknowledged shame or anger, can manifest in physical symptoms or health issues. Thus, integrating your shadow might have indirect physical health benefits, such as lower stress-related ailments due to the reduction in internal tension, greater authenticity, and confidence. When you accept all parts of yourself, you start living more authentically. There is a profound confidence that comes from saying, "Yes, I know I have these flaws or dark feelings at times, and I accept them. I'm working with them." It means you are not hiding from yourself or others. This authenticity tends to enhance self-esteem because you're no longer basing your worth on some perfectionistic ideal. Instead, you have a realistic and compassionate self-image. You trust yourself more, knowing that you can handle the full range of who you are. Wholeness, being the same person inside and out, generates a stable form of confidence. You become less dependent on outside validation, since you're not trying to prove a false persona. As a result, people often find themselves becoming more resilient in the face of criticism or adversity. When you know your dark side and have made peace with it, what is left to fear from others' opinions? Enhanced creativity and innovation. Interestingly, many artists and creators talk about engaging their dark side as a source of inspiration. The shadow is a reservoir of untapped thoughts and feelings, and once opened, it can fuel creativity. Carl Jung noted that the shadow holds a demonic dynamism, an energy that can be destructive if unchecked, but can also be channeled into creativity or constructive action. By integrating your shadow, you might free up creative impulses that were previously blocked by fear or repression. You allow yourself to think more freely, feel more deeply, and thus create more authentically. Even outside the arts, this can mean innovative problem solving, as you're able to consider ideas from both the light, rational mind and the dark, intuitive or emotional depths, moral and ethical growth. While it sounds counterintuitive, facing your own capacity for darkness can actually make you a better person ethically. When you acknowledge your capacity for, say, dishonesty or cruelty, you can consciously keep it in check. People who believe they are incapable of doing wrong, ignoring their shadow, can sometimes justify harmful actions because they've labeled themselves the good guy, no matter what. Those who recognize their inner darkness are often more vigilant not to let it unconsciously influence their behavior. This leads to greater integrity. You strive to do good not to cover up a shadow, as a hypocrite might, but because you genuinely understand what it means to choose empathy over indifference or honesty over deceit, having faced the temptation within yourself. In summary, the benefits of embracing your shadow include better self-knowledge, emotional balance, improved relationships, wholeness, and personal growth. By integrating your dark side, you reduce its power to unconsciously harm you and instead harness that energy for positive change. As one integrative approach explains, taking ownership of your shadow fosters calmness, sanity, healing, inner peace, understanding, and wholeness. These are the hallmarks of someone who is not perfect, no one is, but who is authentically themselves and continually growing. Embracing your shadow is a gradual process. It requires courage, honesty, and patience. Here we outline some key steps and strategies, purely for explanatory purposes, on how one might approach shadow work in a healthy professional manner. 1. Cultivate mindful awareness. The first step is to become aware of your shadow aspects without judgment. As Alan Locos said, it is when we don't have awareness that problems arise. Only once we are aware can we change. Practicing mindfulness can help you observe your thoughts and emotions impartially, like a witness. This means the next time you feel a strong surge of anger, envy, or fear, you don't immediately suppress it or act on it blindly. Instead, pause and notice it. Mindfulness meditation, in particular, is often recommended because it trains you to sit with whatever thoughts or feelings arise without getting lost in them. The goal is to create a mental space where you can see a shadow feeling for what it is, a part of you, but not the entirety of you. One practical mindfulness technique is to check in with yourself during triggering moments. Let's say you feel an irrational irritation towards a colleague or a friend. Rather than outwardly snapping or inwardly denying it, I shouldn't feel this way, take a deep breath and mentally note the feeling. I'm noticing anger and maybe a bit of jealousy right now. Ask yourself gently, why am I reacting this way? What's this emotion trying to tell me? This inquisitive, non-judgmental stance is key to bringing shadow material from the unconscious into consciousness. Remember, awareness itself often diminishes the shadow's power, much like turning on a light in a dark room. Second, practice self-compassion and self-forgiveness. As you start identifying shadow aspects, like realizing you have a tendency to be controlling, or that you feel schadenfreude, pleasure at others' misfortunes sometimes, it's critical to respond with self-compassion. Dr. Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion outlines treating yourself with kindness rather than self-criticism, recognizing that imperfection is part of the human condition, common humanity, and being mindful of your negative thoughts rather than over-identifying with them. In context, this means understanding that having a dark thought or impulse doesn't make you a monster. It makes you human. So instead of saying, I'm a terrible person for feeling this, you say, I notice I have this feeling and it's okay. Everyone has moments like this. What can I learn from it? Forgiving yourself is equally important. We all have memories we cringe at, times we behaved poorly or let our shadow lead. Self-forgiveness involves acknowledging those mistakes, learning from them, and then letting them go. It doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior in a free pass way. It means resolving not to continue that behavior while also not endlessly punishing yourself for it. For instance, if you recall a time you lied to a friend, instead of shaming yourself repeatedly, you might say, "I regret that I lied. I understand I did it out of fear. I forgive myself for not being perfect, and will strive to be more honest and brave next time." Without this compassionate approach, shadow work can turn into self-loathing, which is counterproductive. As one source put it, we can't have true compassion for others if we don't have it for ourselves. This includes having compassion for the perceived worst parts of ourselves. Third, honest reflection. Journal and question yourself. A powerful tool for working with the shadow is reflective journaling or writing exercises. Writing provides a safe, private space to explore thoughts and feelings you might hesitate to speak out loud. One exercise recommended by author Debbie Ford is to imagine a newspaper is writing an article about you. Write down 5 things you dread to see printed about yourself. These often point directly to shadow qualities you fear. Then write 5 things the paper could say that wouldn't bother you. This contrast reveals which traits you deeply reject versus those you're okay with. Ford suggests then asking, are the first 5 things true and the second 5 untrue? And have I decided, maybe with society's help, that those first 5 traits are wrong to be, and thus I don't want them said about me? These questions challenge you to reconsider whether your shame about certain traits is really warranted or just conditioned. Another journaling approach is the mirror technique. List the traits that most bother you in other people. Often these are things you are denying in yourself. For example, if you can't stand arrogance in others, is there a part of you that is arrogant or fears being arrogant? Write about instances where you've displayed or wanted to display those very traits. This exercise is tough but illuminating. It shines a light on projections and encourages you to own those qualities as part of your shadow. Once identified, you can explore how each negative trait might have impacted you or even helped you in life. E.g., maybe stubbornness kept you safe in some situations. This balanced view prevents outright vilifying parts of yourself. Also, consider writing a dialogue with your shadow. You could personify it and have a Q&A on paper. Why are you here? What are you protecting me from? Sometimes the answers that flow out can be surprising and insightful, revealing motivations you didn't realize were behind certain behaviors. Fourth, accept and take responsibility without indulging. Embracing your shadow ultimately means accepting that this dark stuff is yours. Acceptance here is an active state of acknowledging reality. Yes, I have the capacity for anger, selfishness, pettiness, etc., without beating yourself up for it. It's about taking responsibility for these parts. I am accountable for how I manage these feelings, rather than blaming others for them or pretending they don't exist. One author noted that when you truly acknowledge any one of these dark traits instead of avoiding them, suddenly they will stop having control over you. This is because by accepting the trait, you're pulling it into the light of consciousness. You can then choose how to respond when it comes up, rather than automatically reacting. However, a careful distinction. Accepting your shadow is not the same as acting it out. Some people fear that if they embrace their dark side, they'll become immoral or start indulging harmful impulses. On the contrary, integration tempers those impulses. For example, accepting you have aggressive feelings doesn't mean you start fights. It means you recognize the feeling when it arises and can channel it constructively, maybe into assertive communication or physical exercise. As the Loner Wolf article clarifies, embracing or integrating your shadow self doesn't mean to indulge in any desire that arises. Indulging your anger will simply result in more anger. By embracing your inner darkness, I mean that it's necessary to accept it. In practice, that could look like when you notice hatred or jealousy in yourself, you internally say, I see you. That's my anger or envy talking, instead of denying it. Then you decide not to let it dictate your actions. It's a balance of honesty with self-discipline. One technique here is to find a healthy outlet or expression for shadow elements. If you discover, for instance, that you have a controlling streak, perhaps stemming from anxiety, acceptance might involve openly acknowledging it to those close to you. I realize I try to control situations because I get anxious. I'm working on it. And then practicing letting go in small ways to break the habit. Taking responsibility might also mean apologizing when your shadow side does slip out and causes harm, rather than doubling down defensively. Over time, acceptance leads to a kind of partnership with your shadow. You know it's there, you listen to what it tells you about your vulnerabilities, but you consciously choose how to behave. This greatly reduces the shadow's power to unconsciously sabotage your life. Fifth, seek feedback and support. Sometimes we have blind spots that we just can't see without outside perspective. Constructive feedback from trusted friends, family, or a therapist can be invaluable. Let someone you trust know that you're working on understanding your whole self and invite gentle feedback. For example, you might ask, what traits do you think I have that I might not be fully aware of? Or, do you see me doing things that might be against my own values? Be prepared. You may hear something that stings, like a friend saying, well, you do gossip a lot even though you say you hate gossip. Our first reaction might be denial, but if you're committed to shadow work, this is gold. It gives you a clue. Maybe you've disowned your own capacity for negativity by pinning it on others. Hence, you didn't notice your gossiping habit. Professional support, such as therapy or counseling, can provide a safe environment to dive into darker material, especially if your shadow involves trauma or deep-seated issues. A therapist can help you process guilt, shame, or fear that arises and ensure you have the tools to cope. As Psych Central suggests, exploring your shadow side can lead to new levels of understanding and personal growth, and a professional can guide that exploration in a structured way. Therapists are also bound by confidentiality, so you might find it easier to confess your taboo thoughts without fear of judgment. Additionally, resources like books, support groups, or workshops on shadow work and self-development can normalize the experience. Knowing others are on a similar journey and hearing their stories can reduce feelings of isolation or abnormality. It reinforces the idea that confronting the shadow is brave and healing, not weird or bad. Sixth, integrate and rebalance. Integration is the final goal of shadow work, making peace with those parts and finding a proper place for them in your psyche. What does integration look like in daily life? It means you can catch yourself in a negative pattern, and instead of reacting from that shadow place, you respond with your full awareness. For instance, someone who has integrated their anger might still feel anger flare up, but instead of lashing out, they recognize it, maybe take a time out or use I statements to calmly express their feelings. The shadow trait, anger, is not running the show alone. It's now integrated with conscious values like respect and empathy. It's often said that integration brings a sense of wholeness. Jung viewed this as the key to achieving individuation and even spiritual growth. One interesting perspective from Loner Wolf equates integration to regaining a solid center. When you've welcomed back all the disowned pieces, you operate from a place of inner solidity. You are less easily thrown off balance by challenges because all parts of you are aligned and cooperating to handle life. You're no longer like a house divided against itself. A helpful metaphor is the ancient symbol of yin and yang, which the Loner Wolf article also mentions. In the black yin side, there's a dot of white. In the white yang side, there's a dot of black, symbolizing that each contains the seed of the other, and together they form a harmonious whole. Similarly, integrating your shadow is about finding balance between the light and dark within you. You learn that you don't have to act out every dark impulse. That would be chaos. Nor do you have to pretend you have no darkness. That would be delusion. Instead, you channel the energy of the shadow in constructive ways. For example, the competitiveness you denied might fuel you to excel at work without trampling others. Or the selfish need for me time you ignored might teach you to set healthy boundaries and practice self-care. Finally, integrated individuals often report feeling a greater connection to others and the world. Since they've accepted their own humanity, flaws and all, they tend to be more accepting of humanity in general. This can lead to a sense of unity or oneness. Ironically, by embracing your individual shadow, you realize some universal truths about the human experience. You might even experience what Jung and others describe as a spiritual upliftment, because you've reconciled with your inner demons and can now move towards your higher aspirations unimpeded. Important: shadow work is intense, and it's not something one accomplishes in a single sitting or even a few weeks. It can be a lifelong journey, revisiting layers of the psyche. Therefore, always approach it with care. Go at a pace that feels safe, sometimes working on lighter shadows, say your habit of vanity, before tackling heavier ones, say a buried trauma or deep rage. And remember to balance this inner work with self-care and moments of joy. You're delving into dark areas, so ensure you have support and also give yourself breaks to rest and integrate. Embracing your shadow side is ultimately about embracing your whole self, the good, the bad, and the ugly, with honesty and compassion. The dark side of your personality is not there to be eliminated. It's there to be understood and integrated. By shining a light on our inner darkness, we reclaim the power it holds over us. We learned that everyone has a shadow, and acknowledging this fact helps remove the stigma and fear around it. Far from making you a worse person, facing your dark side can make you more self-aware, empathetic, and in control of your life. The shadow reveals what you truly need, where you need healing, and what untapped strengths lie within your forbidden impulses. As Jung and others taught, there is potential treasure in the traits we hide: creativity, insight, resilience, authenticity, if only we have the courage to face them. Neglecting the shadow, on the other hand, can lead to unwanted consequences: projections onto others, emotional outbursts, inner fragmentation, and a life driven by unconscious forces. But the moment you turn toward the shadow with mindful awareness, you've taken the crucial first step to neutralizing its negative impact. Throughout this exploration, we highlighted how integrating the shadow brings balance. Just as you cannot have day without night, you cannot have a complete self without both your light and dark facets. Embracing your shadow is an ongoing practice of mindfulness, self-compassion, honesty, and courage. It asks you to be patient and gentle with yourself, recognizing that growth often comes from the darkest places. In the words of one author, when we take the time to discover our shadow and its gifts, we will understand what Jung meant by "the gold is in the dark." So consider this an invitation, perhaps one of life's most important invitations, to get to know your shadow. What might you discover about your true self in the process? By facing the mystery of your dark side, you stand to gain the energy, wisdom, and wholeness that have been waiting quietly in the depths of your personality. Embrace your shadow, and you embrace your humanity, unlocking a more genuine, balanced, and empowered you.